Hi everyone, and welcome back to our PC maintenance and hardware class. I'm excited to dive into today's topic, motherboards. Whether you're a student or a tech enthusiast watching on YouTube, understanding motherboards is crucial for anyone looking to get hands-on with PC hardware. In this module, we're going to break down everything you need to know about motherboards. We'll explore the different types, their features, and how they impact your PC's performance. You'll also learn how to configure your motherboard using BIOS, UEFI firmware, maintain it by updating drivers and firmware, and even how to use jumpers and replace the CMOS battery. Plus, we'll go through the steps to select, install, and replace a motherboard. By the end of this module, you'll have a solid grasp of how motherboards work and how to keep them running smoothly. Before we jump in, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more great content. If you have any questions or thoughts, drop a comment below. We love hearing from you, and your feedback helps us keep creating awesome content. So, let's get started and demystify the heart of your PC, the motherboard. By the end of this module, you'll be ready to tackle a range of essential motherboard tasks with confidence. First, you'll be able to describe and contrast the different types and features of motherboards. We'll dive into the specifics of various motherboard types and what makes each one unique. Next, you'll learn how to configure a motherboard using BIOS, UEFI firmware. This means you'll be able to access these settings, make necessary adjustments, and ensure your system is set up just the way you need it. We'll also cover how to maintain a motherboard effectively. This includes updating drivers and firmware, using jumpers to reset BIOS, UEFI settings if things go awry, and replacing the CMOS battery to keep your system clock and settings accurate. Finally, you'll gain the skills to select, install, and replace a desktop motherboard. We'll walk through the entire process, from choosing the right motherboard for your needs to getting it installed and up and running smoothly. Stick with us, and you'll master these skills in no time. When it comes to computer components, the motherboard is often the most complex part. It's like the central hub that connects everything together, so getting it right is crucial. When you're building a computer, the motherboard is one of the first things you should think about. Here are some key factors to consider when choosing a motherboard. Form factor. This determines the size and shape of the motherboard and ensures it fits in your computer case. Common form factors include ATX, Micro-ATX, and Mini-ITX. Processor socket. This is the slot where the CPU, processor, will be installed. Make sure the socket type matches your processor. Chipset. The chipset controls how the motherboard communicates with other components. Different chipsets offer different features and performance levels. Expansion slots. These slots allow you to add extra components like graphics cards, sound cards, or network cards. Check the number and type of expansion slots available. Other connectors, slots, and ports. Look at the additional connectors and ports for things like USB devices, storage drives, and RAM. These will affect how many peripherals you can connect and how you can expand your system in the future. By keeping these factors in mind, you'll be able to select a motherboard that fits your needs and sets up your system for success. The motherboard form factor is key because it dictates the size of the motherboard and its compatibility with power supplies and computer cases. The most popular form factors you'll encounter are ATX. This standard size is commonly used and provides a balanced mix of features and expansion options. Micro-ATX. A bit smaller than ATX, Micro-ATX is great for more compact builds while still offering a decent number of expansion slots. Extended ATX, E-ATX. Larger than the standard ATX, E-ATX motherboards give you more space for additional components, making them ideal for high-performance or gaming setups. Mini-ITX. This is the smallest form factor, perfect for ultra-compact builds. Despite its size, it can still accommodate powerful components. Understanding these form factors will help you choose the right motherboard for your needs and ensure it fits well with your case and other components. Let's talk about the chipset, which is a critical part of your motherboard. A chipset is essentially a collection of chips on the motherboard that works closely with the processor. Its job is to manage the memory, control the data buses on the motherboard, and handle some of the peripherals. Think of it as the middleman between the processor and other components, making sure everything communicates effectively. For everything to work smoothly, the chipset must be compatible with the processor it supports. If they're not compatible, you'll run into problems with performance or functionality. Also, you'll hear the term socket a lot. This is a rectangular slot on the motherboard with pins or pads where the processor is installed. The socket type must match the processor you choose to ensure a proper connection. The two major players in the chipset and processor game are Intel and AMD. Each of these manufacturers offers a range of chipsets and processors, so choosing the right combination depends on your specific needs and preferences. Understanding these components will help you make informed choices when building or upgrading your PC. Let's talk about some of the latest Intel chipsets and sockets available today. Intel has released several series of chipsets that you might come across. 600 series desktop chipsets. These are among the newest and offer advanced features for high-performance systems. 400 and 500 series desktop chipsets. These are slightly older but still provide great performance and support for many modern processors. 300 series desktop chipsets. These chipsets are getting a bit dated but are still used in many systems for reliable performance. 200 series desktop chipsets. The oldest in this list, these chipsets are typically found in older builds but might still be relevant for specific uses. When it comes to sockets, here are some of the current Intel sockets. LGA1700 socket. This is designed for the latest processors, offering support for newer technologies and improvements. LGA1200 socket. Used by a range of processors and chipsets, this socket provides solid performance for many users. LGA1151 socket. An older socket that's still in use in many systems, supporting a range of processors and chipsets. Choosing the right chipset and socket is essential to ensure compatibility and performance for your system. Now, let's dive into AMD's current chipset and socket categories. AMD offers a variety of options, each designed for different needs and processors. STRX4 socket. This socket is paired with the TRX40 chipset and is designed for high-end desktop processors, providing robust performance for demanding applications. TR4 socket. Used with the AMD X399 chipset, the TR4 socket supports AMD's Threadripper processors, which are great for tasks that require a lot of computing power. AM4 socket. This is a versatile and widely used socket, compatible with both AMD Ryzen and Athlon processors. It's the go-to choice for most of AMD's current mainstream CPUs. AM3 Plus socket. This older socket is used with AMD's Piledriver and Bulldozer processors. While it's not as modern as the others, it's still found in some older systems. Each of these sockets and chipsets serves a specific purpose, so choosing the right one depends on the type of processor you need and the performance you're aiming for. When it comes to matching a processor with a motherboard and socket, here's how you can ensure everything fits perfectly. Check the motherboard manufacturer's website or user guide. Start by visiting the motherboard manufacturer's website or referring to the user guide that came with your motherboard. These resources usually have a list of supported processors, so you can see which ones are compatible with your motherboard. Verify on the Intel or AMD website. For an added layer of certainty, you can also check the Intel or AMD websites. They provide detailed specifications for their processors, including the socket type. Make sure that the processor's socket matches the socket on your motherboard. By following these steps, you'll be able to confirm that your processor and motherboard are a perfect match, avoiding any compatibility issues. With an understanding of chipsets under your belt, now let's turn our attention to some of the details you'll find on a motherboard. First up, you might notice fine lines on both the top and bottom of the motherboard. These lines are often referred to as traces. Traces are essentially the circuits or pathways that allow data, instructions, timing signals, and power to travel between different components on the board. Now, let's talk about the bus. A bus is like a communication highway on the motherboard. It's a system of pathways that handles the transmission of data between components. It includes both the physical pathways and the protocols used for sending information. Speaking of protocols, these are the sets of rules and standards that ensure smooth communication between different parts of your system. Think of a protocol as a common language that helps different components understand each other and work together effectively. Understanding these elements helps you grasp how data and power flow through your motherboard, which is crucial for troubleshooting and optimizing your system. PCI Express, commonly known as PCIe, is a crucial component for expanding your computer's capabilities. PCI Express slots come in 4 different sizes: X1, X4, X8, and X16. The number following the X tells you how many lanes are available for data transfer. For example, PCI Express X4 has 4 lanes. PCI Express X16 has 16 lanes and is often used for graphics cards that need a lot of data bandwidth. The PCI Express X16 slot is particularly important for high-performance graphics cards because it supports the large amount of data needed for smooth graphics and gaming experiences. Now, if your graphics card requires more power, it might come with additional power connectors. These can be 1, 2, or even 3 separate connectors to ensure it gets the extra wattage it needs to perform at its best. Now, let's look at some older technology with newer options to give you a clearer picture of how things have evolved. Conventional PCI slots are older than PCI Express and are generally slower. The PCI bus transmits 32 data bits in parallel and operates at about 500 megabits per second. While this was sufficient for many add-on cards in the past, PCI Express has since taken over due to its faster speeds and more efficient data transfer. Onboard ports, or integrated components, are ports that come directly off the motherboard. These ports can include USB for connecting peripherals, PS2 for older mouse and keyboard connections, video ports for monitors, sound ports for audio, network ports for internet connectivity, and eSATA for external storage devices. An I/O shield is a metal plate installed in the computer case that has cutouts for these ports. It ensures that the ports align correctly with the motherboard and provides protection and organization for these connections. Inside the computer, the motherboard also features several internal connectors. These include USB connectors for additional internal USB ports, M2 connectors for high-speed storage devices, SATA connectors for traditional hard drives and SSDs, PCI Express connectors for expansion cards and additional peripherals. Understanding these components helps you know how to connect and expand your computer's capabilities effectively. Other key interfaces and connectors you'll find on a motherboard include SATA, or Serial Advanced Technology Attachment, is a standard used primarily for connecting storage devices like hard drives and SSDs. The current versions include SATA Express, offers higher speeds for more demanding storage needs. SATA 3X, the most common version today, providing improved performance over earlier versions. SATA 2X, an older version, still in use but slower compared to SATA 3X. SAS, or Serial Attached SCSI, is another interface standard used mainly for storage devices. It's the successor to the older SCSI standard and is known for its reliability and speed in enterprise environments. M2, formerly known as Next Generation Form Factor, is a versatile connector that can use PCIe, USB, or SATA interfaces to connect mini add-on cards. It's commonly used for high-speed storage and other expansion cards. Additionally, motherboards often come with USB headers. These are connectors on the motherboard that allow you to connect a cable from the motherboard to the USB ports on the front of your computer case. This setup makes it easy to access USB ports without having to reach around the back of your PC. Firmware on the motherboard is used to Enable or disable a connector, port, or component. Control the frequency and other features of the CPU. Manage security features. Control what happens when the computer first boots. Monitor and log various activities of the board. Motherboards made after 2012 use BIOS, UEFI firmware. UEFI, Unified Extensible Firmware Interface, improves on BIOS but includes BIOS for backward compatibility with older devices. UEFI is increasingly replacing traditional BIOS. For example, if you want your system to be certified for Windows 10 or Windows 8, Microsoft requires that it uses UEFI. This is a key standard for newer systems. UEFI is essential if you're using hard drives larger than 2 terabytes. It supports these large drives by using a more advanced partitioning scheme than the older BIOS. One of the great features of UEFI is Secure Boot. This helps keep your system safe by ensuring that only drivers and operating system files that are digitally signed and trusted can boot up. This prevents malicious software from loading during the boot process. UEFI isn't just about new tech, it's also designed to be backward compatible. With its compatibility support module feature, UEFI can boot from a master boot record hard drive and provide a BIOS-like experience for older systems and software. To access the BIOS UEFI setup program on your computer, follow these simple steps. You need to press the correct key or key combination during boot. For most motherboards, this key is either F12 or the delete key. Timing is crucial. Press the key as soon as you see the computer start booting. Check your documentation or boot screen. If you're unsure which key to press, you can refer to the documentation that came with your motherboard. Alternatively, keep an eye on the screen during the initial stages of booting. It often displays a message like, "Press delete to enter setup." Once you're in the BIOS UEFI setup, you'll see a setup screen with various menus and help options. From here, you can make adjustments to your system settings, such as boot order, hardware configuration, and more. Entering BIOS UEFI is the first step to configuring or troubleshooting your motherboard, so getting familiar with this process is essential. Managing secure boot is an essential feature designed to protect your system from malware. What is secure boot? Secure boot is a security feature that helps prevent malicious software from launching before your operating system and anti-malware tools kick in. This is crucial because malware that starts before your operating systems can be particularly dangerous and difficult to detect. How does it work? Secure boot works only when your system is in UEFI mode, not in compatibility support module mode, and is supported by operating systems like Windows 10 and several Linux distributions. It relies on digital signatures, encryption keys, and drivers stored in databases on your motherboard's flash memory or your hard drive. When secure boot is enabled, it checks each driver, the operating system, and any applications before they launch, ensuring they are signed and recognized in the secure boot databases. This verification process helps protect your system from unauthorized or harmful software. By managing secure boot properly, you can enhance your system security, making it much harder for malware to compromise your computer before your operating system has a chance to protect it. You can tweak various onboard devices directly through the BIOS UEFI setup. For example, in BIOS UEFI, you can enable or disable specific onboard devices like network ports, USB ports, or video ports. The options available will depend on the devices integrated into your motherboard. As a more specific example, USB PowerShare lets you charge devices through a USB port even when your computer is turned off. It's perfect for keeping your gadgets powered up without leaving your computer running. Another example is overclocking. However, proceed with caution. Overclocking involves running your processor, memory, motherboard, or video card at speeds higher than what the manufacturer recommends. While some motherboards and processors support this feature, it's not a recommended practice for most users. Overclocking can lead to system instability or even hardware damage if not done carefully. With BIOS UEFI setup, you have the power to fine-tune your system to match your needs. Just remember to make changes thoughtfully, especially when it comes to features like overclocking. Some motherboards offer a feature that lets you set a password to access your hard drive. It's a basic layer of security that protects a few critical organizational sectors of the drive, but it doesn't encrypt all the data on the drive. The TPM chip and hard drive encryption. Many motherboards come with a trusted platform module chip, which plays a crucial role in securing your data. The BitLocker encryption tool in Windows is specifically designed to work with this chip. The BitLocker encryption key, also known as the startup key, is stored on the TPM chip. This ensures that even if someone removes your hard drive and tries to use it in another computer, it won't work without that key, adding a significant layer of security to your data. Virtualization is a process where a single physical computer uses software to create multiple virtual computers, known as virtual machines. Each VM functions just like a real, physical computer, complete with its own virtual devices like a virtual motherboard and a virtual hard drive. To get virtualization up and running, you'll need to enable it in your BIOS or UEFI setup. This allows your system to support and manage these virtual environments efficiently. Once you're done making changes in the BIOS, UEFI setup, you'll come across an exit screen that presents a few options. Save and exit lets you save changes you've made in exit setup. Discard and exit allows you to exit without saving any changes. Load optimized defaults can be a lifesaver if you've made several changes that aren't working out or if you're trying to fix an error that occurred during a firmware update. It resets everything to the default settings that are often the most stable and reliable. Knowledge check. Which of the following motherboard form factors is the largest and typically offers the most expansion slots and features? A. ATX. B. Mini-ITX. C. Micro-ATX. D. Extended ATX. E-ATX. Answer. Extended ATX. The extended ATX form factor is the largest among the listed options. It typically offers more expansion slots, such as PCI Express slots, and additional features compared to the ATX, Micro-ATX, and Mini-ITX form factors. E-ATX motherboards are often used in high-performance systems that require more power and connectivity options, such as gaming rigs and servers. Keeping your motherboard drivers and BIOS, UEFI firmware up to date can make a big difference in how your computer runs. A few scenarios where updating can help include system crashes. If your computer is crashing randomly, updating the BIOS, UEFI firmware might fix those stability issues. New hardware not recognized. Installing new hardware like a GPU or SSD, but it's not working. Updating your motherboard drivers can solve compatibility issues. Slow performance. If your computer is running slower than usual, a driver update can help your motherboard communicate better with other components, boosting performance. Security vulnerabilities. BIOS, UEFI updates often include important security patches to protect your system from new threats. OS installation issues. Having trouble installing a new operating system? Updating the BIOS, UEFI might resolve those installation problems. Keeping everything up to date ensures your system stays stable, secure, and ready to handle new hardware and software. Device drivers are essential for your operating system to communicate effectively with the hardware on your motherboard. Think of them as small programs that act as translators between the OS and the hardware components. When you get a new motherboard, it usually comes with a CD or DVD that includes a user guide and the drivers needed for the onboard components. After you install the motherboard, you'll need to install these drivers to ensure everything works properly. You can start by using the drivers on the CD or DVD, but it's a good idea to visit the motherboard manufacturer's website afterward to download any available updates. Sometimes these updates can also come through Windows updates. Just make sure you're downloading the correct drivers for your specific OS edition and type, like Windows 10, 64-bit, for example. This ensures that your system remains compatible and functions smoothly. Upgrading or refreshing the programming and data stored on your motherboard's firmware chip is known as updating firmware, flashing BIOS, UEFI, or simply flashing BIOS. This process can help improve system stability, compatibility, and performance. When flashing BIOS, UEFI, it's crucial to follow the specific directions provided in your motherboard's user guide to avoid any potential issues. Otherwise, you might end up with a boat anchor at the end of the process. Motherboards typically offer several methods for flashing BIOS, UEFI, which include downloading and updating directly from within the BIOS, UEFI setup. This method allows you to update your firmware by downloading the latest version while you're in the BIOS, UEFI interface. You can also update from a USB flash drive using BIOS, UEFI setup. This involves downloading the update to a USB drive, then using BIOS, UEFI to install it from the drive. You can slow run an express BIOS, UEFI update. This method simplifies the process by allowing you to update the firmware quickly, often through an automated process. Always ensure you follow the instructions closely to ensure a successful update. Sometimes, it is necessary to reset the BIOS to return to factory setting. One method of doing this is through the proper configuration of jumpers. A jumper is a pair of small metal pins on the motherboard that stores configuration information. These pins can be either open or closed. Jumpers are especially useful if something goes wrong during a BIOS, UEFI update. For example, if the update fails and your system becomes unresponsive, you can use a jumper to reset the motherboard to its default settings, effectively undoing the failed update. To safely and correctly set jumpers, always refer to your motherboard's documentation for detailed instructions. This will guide you on the exact steps to follow, ensuring that you avoid any potential issues. A motherboard is known as a field replaceable unit, meaning it can be replaced in the field without returning the entire system to a service center. As a technician, it's crucial to understand how to select the right motherboard for a system and know the steps involved in installing or replacing one in both desktop and laptop computers. Whether you're building a new computer or upgrading an existing one, choosing the correct motherboard involves considering compatibility with other components, like the processor and RAM. Additionally, knowing how to properly install or replace a motherboard ensures that the system runs smoothly and efficiently after the swap. When selecting a motherboard, consider these 3 approaches to find the right fit for your needs. Opt for maximum expansion. Choose a motherboard that offers ample room for future upgrades. This is ideal if you plan on adding more components or expanding your system over time. Alternatively, match your current configuration. Pick a motherboard that perfectly suits the needs of your current setup. This approach focuses on immediate compatibility and functionality without considering future expansions. Or, balance between needs and expansion. Select a motherboard that meets your present requirements while allowing moderate room for future upgrades. This provides a good balance between current needs and future potential. When making your choice, ask yourself the following questions. How will the motherboard be used? Understanding the primary purpose of the system, e.g., gaming, professional work, general use, helps in selecting the appropriate features. Also ask yourself what form factor is needed. Determine the size of the motherboard that fits your case, e.g., ATX, Micro-ATX, Mini-ITX. Finally, ask which processor brands and models are supported. Check if the motherboard is compatible with your preferred Intel or AMD processors and the specific chipsets they use. By addressing these questions, you can ensure that you select a motherboard that aligns with both your current and future computing needs. When choosing a motherboard, consider these additional questions to ensure it's the right fit for your needs. Which type and speed of memory does the board support? Check the motherboard specifications to ensure it supports the type, DDR4, DDR5, and speed of RAM you plan to use. Compatibility is crucial for optimal performance. Does the board fit the case you plan to use? Make sure the motherboard's form factor matches your computer case. This ensures that the board will physically fit and align with the case's mounting points. What are the price and warranty on the board? Does the board get good reviews? Evaluate the cost of the motherboard and compare it with similar options. Also, check the warranty offered and look for reviews to gauge the reliability and performance of the board. How extensive and user-friendly is the documentation? How helpful is the manufacturer's website? Review the quality of the motherboard's documentation and the manufacturer's website. Good documentation and support can make installation and troubleshooting much easier. What warranty and support does the manufacturer provide? Investigate the level of support and warranty the manufacturer offers. This includes customer service availability, support resources, and the terms of the warranty. By answering these questions, you'll be better equipped to select a motherboard that meets your requirements and provides a good balance of performance, compatibility, and support. Replacing a motherboard involves several key steps to ensure everything is installed correctly and functions properly. Here's a general guide to help you through the process. Verify the right motherboard is selected. Make sure you have the correct motherboard for your needs. Check that it matches the form factor of your case and is compatible with your processor, memory, and other components. Get familiar with documentation, features, and settings. Review the motherboard's documentation thoroughly. Understand its features, settings, and how to configure it. This will help you during installation and setup. Remove components to reach the old motherboard. Carefully disconnect and remove all components attached to the old motherboard. This includes cables, expansion cards, RAM, and any other connected devices. Install the I/O shield. Place the I/O shield into the back of the case. This shield protects the ports on the motherboard and ensures a snug fit with the case's rear panel. Install the motherboard. Position the new motherboard in the case, aligning it with the mounting standoffs. Secure it with screws, making sure it's firmly in place. Install the processor and processor cooler. Install the processor into the motherboard socket and apply thermal paste if needed. Attach the processor cooler securely to keep the CPU from overheating. Install RAM into the appropriate slots on the motherboard. Insert the RAM modules into the designated slots on the motherboard. Ensure they click into place and are properly seated. Attach the wires and cabling. Reconnect all necessary cables, including those for the case switches, power supply, and drives. Double-check each connection to ensure they are secure and correctly placed. Install the video card on the motherboard. Insert your video card into the appropriate PCIe slot on the motherboard. Make sure it's securely seated and attach any necessary power cables if required. Plug the computer into a power source. Connect your computer to a power source. Check that all power cables are firmly connected and that the power supply is turned on. Boot the system and enter UEFI, BIOS setup. Power on your computer and immediately enter the UEFI, BIOS setup by pressing the designated key, usually F2, F10, or del. This will allow you to check initial settings and configurations. Observe, post, and verify no errors occur. Watch the power on self-test, post-process as the computer boots. Ensure there are no error messages or warnings that could indicate hardware issues. Verify that Windows starts with no errors. Allow Windows to boot up and check for any startup errors. The operating system should load without issues if everything is installed correctly. Install the motherboard drivers. Install the drivers for the motherboard from the CD, DVD, or download them from the motherboard manufacturer's website. This ensures all onboard components and features work correctly. Install any other expansion cards and drivers. If you have additional expansion cards, like sound cards or network cards, install them and then update their drivers to ensure full functionality. Verify that the system is operating properly. Check that the system is running smoothly. Make any necessary final adjustments in the OS and UEFI, BIOS settings to optimize performance and ensure everything is functioning as expected. By following these steps, you'll complete the motherboard replacement and have a fully operational system. Knowledge check. When updating the motherboard drivers or BIOS, UEFI firmware, which of the following is the recommended first step? A. Install the motherboard drivers from the CD, DVD included with the motherboard and then download any updates from the manufacturer's website. B. Immediately update the BIOS, UEFI firmware using a USB flash drive without checking the current version. C. Remove the motherboard and replace it with a new one before updating drivers or firmware. D. Install the operating system before updating the motherboard drivers or BIOS, UEFI firmware. Answer. Install the motherboard drivers from the CD/DVD included with the motherboard and then download any updates from the manufacturer's website. The recommended first step when updating motherboard drivers or BIOS, UEFI firmware is to start by installing the drivers from the CD/DVD that comes with the motherboard. This ensures that the essential drivers for the motherboard's onboard components are installed. After this, you should check for and download any additional updates from the motherboard manufacturer's website to ensure you have the latest drivers and firmware updates. This approach helps ensure compatibility and optimal performance of the motherboard with your operating system and hardware. As we wrap up this module on motherboards, let's take a moment to reflect on what you've learned. This is a great opportunity for you to assess your understanding and identify any areas where you might need a little more review. Here's a quick self-assessment guide. 1. Identifying and explaining motherboard types. On a scale from 1 to 5, how confident are you in your ability to identify and explain different types of motherboards, like ATX, Micro-ATX, Mini-ITX, and E-ATX? Consider their key features such as expansion slots, RAM support, and connectivity options. 2. Accessing and configuring BIOS, UEFI. Rate your confidence from 1 to 5 on accessing the BIOS, UEFI setup, updating firmware, setting the boot order, and adjusting basic hardware settings. 3. Updating drivers and firmware. How confident are you, 1 to 5, in updating motherboard drivers and firmware, using jumpers to reset BIOS, UEFI settings, and replacing the CMOS battery to keep the motherboard running smoothly? 4. Choosing and installing a motherboard. Finally, rate your understanding from 1 to 5 on choosing the right motherboard based on your needs, properly installing a new motherboard, and replacing an old one while ensuring all components are correctly connected and functioning. If you've rated yourself less than a 4 in any area, don't worry. Take some time to review the relevant sections of the module again or look for additional resources to strengthen your understanding. Feel free to revisit the lesson materials or leave a comment if you have any questions. Remember, the more you practice and review, the more confident you'll become. Thank you for joining us. In this module, we explored the world of motherboards, diving into their various types, key features, and how to configure and maintain them. We covered everything from selecting the right motherboard to accessing BIOS, UEFI settings, updating drivers, and installing new components. Thank you for watching. If you found this content helpful, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe to stay updated with more great videos, and share this with your friends and classmates. Your support helps me create even more valuable content. Don't forget to leave a comment with your thoughts or questions. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next video.